These are the 5 best returning players for Syracuse football this upcoming season.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are going over the 5 best returning Syracuse football players for 2024, which, by the way, is only 5 days away. We are officially in game week. So first, we're going to go over the offense returners. We got 2 of them, then 3 defensive players, and then a final ranking for the 5 best players that are returning for Syracuse football. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's start off with the offense, and there are 2 players that are returning on this offense that I believe cracked the top 5. And that is, first of all, Oronde Gadsden, a 6'5", 240-pound tight end with 2 years of eligibility remaining. And the depth chart was recently released for Syracuse football. And to nobody's surprise, he is the starting tight end for this team. Oronde Gadsden is someone who made preseason All-ACC. And keep in mind, the preseason All-ACC team was just one team, meaning that he was voted as the best tight end, at least in the preseason, the best tight end in the conference. And for good reason. Obviously, last year, he only played about a game and 5 minutes. He got hurt very early against Western Michigan. But in 2022, Oronde Gadsden was first team All-ACC and had a Syracuse tight end record of 969 receiving yards. That's pretty impressive stuff, right? Oronde Gadsden is back once again for this team. I'm so excited to watch him play in just 5 days because this is someone who can be an All-American caliber player. In my mind, he is the best player on the team. So spoiler to the final list segment, he is going to be number 1 on this list. Bottom line, he's the best tight end in the ACC, and he's one of the best tight ends in the country. If I had to give a final stat prediction, I do think that Syracuse does have more weapons than it did in 2022. So there's one category where I think he'll go down in. I think he's going to have slightly more catches than he did in 2022. So I'll go with 65 catches for Oronde Gadsden this year. And keep in mind, I'm only going to say in 12 games. I'm not going to count the bowl game. So in 12 games, Oronde Gadsden will have 65 catches, which is just a little over 5 a game. He'll have 900 yards, which is slightly lower than what he did in 2022. But here's where I see the increase coming. The touchdowns. He didn't have as much as you think in 2022. Off the top of my head, I believe he only had 6 touchdowns in 2022. So I'm going to say for this season, he's going to have 10 or more. How about that? Oronde Gadsden will have at least 10 receiving touchdowns this season. And if I'm going to be even bolder, I think he's going to have 2 touchdowns against Ohio in about 5 days. Why? I don't know. I just got a gut feeling. All right, Oronde Gadsden for 2 touchdowns against Ohio in week 1 because I'm so excited to watch him play. So that means he's definitely going to do well. And he's going to have 10 or more this upcoming season. So Oronde Gadsden leads us off on the offense returning players who cracked the top 5 on my list of overall returning players on this team for Syracuse football. Let's move on to the second player on offense that made the top 5. And that is LeQuint Allen, a 6', 195-pound running back with 2 years of eligibility remaining. He was second team All-ACC last season, but he didn't crack the preseason All-ACC team, but that's okay. He's still definitely someone who can make all-conference once again. Remember, that was only the first team that was listed out in the preseason poll. Last season, he was really good. Remember, he took over for Sean Tucker, who was outstanding in his time on the Hill. And that's big shoes to fill. Someone like Sean Tucker, who set a single-season rushing record for this team just a few years ago. And I thought LeQuint Allen did a very, very solid job for this team last year. Obviously, second team All-ACC. Of course, he did a great job, right? He had over 1,000 yards. He caught 38 passes, and he also went for about 200 yards in the air as well. So 38 catches for 200 yards. I phrased that weird for some reason. The one area where he can really improve on, because he's pretty well-rounded, right? He can run between the tackles. He can run outside. He can catch passes. The one area of improvement is the yards per carry. Last year, he was at 4.3, which for the NFL is pretty good, right? If you're an NFL running back running for 4.3 yards per carry, that's good. But for college football as an elite running back, that's maybe on the lower end. You want to see it kind of creep into the upper fours, into the fives. Even the best of the best will have like a 6, but I'm not expecting that this upcoming season for LeQuint Allen. But that's where he can really improve. And I think he has a good shot of improving that, because his stats are really weighed down from what happened in the bowl game last season when he had 20 carries for 2 yards. So that really skews his yards per carry. And I believe when I mentioned this a few weeks ago on the podcast, I said that LeQuint Allen's yards per carry going into that game was probably around like 4.7, 4.8, which is still room for improvement, but solid. Then he has 20 carries for 2 yards. Now you're down to 4.3. So I think he can really improve there. My stat prediction for LeQuint Allen this upcoming season, I don't think he's going to see the same volume that he had last year. Last year, he had over 240 carries in 13 games. So I'm only going to give a 12-game prediction here, but I'm going to say 210 carries. So that's going to be less carries per game, but I think he'll be more efficient. So let's say over 1,100 yards. That's over 5 yards per carry. And I'm going to say 7 rushing touchdowns. I think that's a fair number, because I think Yassine Willis is going to vulture some touchdowns, particularly near the goal line, right? The depth chart recently came out. I'm actually recording at the time it just came out. So I saw that Yassine Willis is listed as one of the backup running backs. That's not a surprise to anyone, really. So I think Yassine Willis, the true freshman, will take some touchdowns away from LeQuint Allen. As far as a receiving stat prediction for LeQuint Allen, let's go with 30 catches, so a little bit lower than what he did last year, but for more efficiency. So we'll say 200 yards. And the reasoning for that is because, well, their other backup running back is Will Nixon, the transfer from Washington, who is a very solid receiving back in his own right. So you might be asking yourself, why am I predicting LeQuint Allen to probably have lesser numbers than you might imagine? It's not due to LeQuint Allen's talent. LeQuint Allen is a bell cow back. He can play all 3 downs. But the best part about this team, at least on paper, is that they look much deeper than in years past. So this stat prediction is not an indictment on LeQuint Allen or Oronde Gadsden. I just think that there are a lot of weapons. There are a lot of mouths to feed. And so overall, LeQuint Allen can play all 3 downs. He can. Absolutely. He did last season. He was second team All-ACC. But with Yassine Willis being a backup power back and Will Nixon being a backup receiving back, at least for early in games, you don't have to play LeQuint Allen all 3 downs. You can have LeQuint Allen on first and second down. If you want, if it's second down and 1, you can put in Yassine Willis, even on second down, right? So LeQuint Allen doesn't have to play as much, but I think he's going to be much more efficient than he was last season. So the 2 players on offense that made my top 5 list of returners for Syracuse football are Oronde Gadsden and LeQuint Allen. Now, coming up, we're going to go over the 3 defensive players who made the cut. Tired after lunch? Well, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, you can get it all from Locked On's stable of college experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Let's now go over the 3 defensive players of all the returners who made my list of the top 5 on Syracuse's roster. So let's start off with Marlowe Wax, 6'1", 240-pound linebacker in his last year of eligibility. And he was, I believe, one of 2 players, along with Oronde Gadsden, who made preseason All ACC. So this is already, at least in the preseason, one of the best linebackers in the conference. That's right, all conference talent on Syracuse Football's roster. Last year, he was second team All ACC. So essentially, the pundits are expecting that Marlowe Wax takes another step forward, goes from the second team to the first team. And I can't really fault them for that, obviously, right? Because in 2022, Marlowe Wax was ACC honorable mention. So there's a climb there. He has gotten better every single year. In 2022, he's honorable mention. In 2023, he was second team All ACC. In 2024, if you continue that upward path of development, that means first team All ACC for Marlowe Wax. And I think he's going to hit that. I think he will cash in on the preseason hype and be first team All ACC. In fact, I think there are 2 players in Syracuse's roster that will be first team All ACC. The other one is Oronde Gadsden, who we talked about earlier in the podcast. As far as more of what Wax did last season for this team, well, he made 110 tackles, which was 3rd in the conference. He also had 4 sacks, which is very good for an inside linebacker. And also he made 11.5 tackles for loss, which was just outside the top 10 in the ACC. 11.5 tackles for loss just didn't quite make the cut for the top 10 in the conference. But 11th is certainly pretty good, and I think he's going to have even more tackles for loss this season. How about 13, right? We'll say a slight uptick in tackles for loss. It's very difficult to project that stat. Honestly, I don't know how to project that stat. He had 11.5 last year. We'll say 13 or 14 for Marlowe Wax, and he cashes in on that preseason hype as a first-team All-ACC linebacker for this team next season, which is, well, 5 days away. Cool. All right, let's go to another player on defense, and that is Justin Barron, 6'4", 225-pound safety with just this year of eligibility left. He was someone that was very, very close to transferring out of the program, but thank goodness Justin Barron is back for this team because he's exceptionally talented. Last year, he played, I believe, more than half the season with a broken hand. So if you see a player, if you watch highlights of Syracuse football last season on defense in the second half, and you see a player that's running around with a club on their hand, well, that is Justin Barron, who was playing with a broken hand and made ACC honorable mention. He was an honorable mention with one hand. That's pretty difficult to do. It's hard enough to make honorable mention with 2 hands because most players in the ACC will not make an all-conference team in their entire careers. Justin Barron did it with one hand. So hopefully he can use both his hands this season and be even better for this team. He made 90 tackles, again, one hand, and he also had one interception, and that was his only career interception. It came against Army. So if I had to give a bold prediction, I'm not someone, honestly, full transparency, I'm not someone who's like a bold take, bold prediction person. I'm more so, I'm going to give you my opinion and you can interpret it how you want. So I'm kind of poking at myself for saying a bold prediction here. Let's say Justin Barron records at least 2 interceptions this year. Again, I don't really think it's that bold, but he only has 1 career interception. So, hey, he'll at least double it. He'll double his career total. He'll have at least 2, if not 3. And why not? Let's just throw in a pick against Ohio in 5 days. Sound good, everyone? Cool. I like Justin Barron for this upcoming season, especially because he's going to have 2 hands to play with. All right, let's now move on to the final returning player on defense that made my top 5 list. And then later on in the show, which honestly isn't going to be that far from now, we're going to go over the final ranking where I sort all these players one by one. But anyways, final defensive player is Alijah Clark, a 6'1", 185-pound safety with just 1 year of eligibility left, so I believe that's this season. He's been a starter for Syracuse the last 2 years. He started his career at Rutgers, and his only career interception actually came at Rutgers last season. 65 tackles for Alijah Clark and 4.5 tackles for loss, which were both career highs. Now, with Alijah Clark, this is someone who I don't think has made ACC honorable mention or any of the 3 all-ACC teams. He's certainly a candidate to be able to do that for this upcoming season. It's difficult to project, but he's in that. It is in the range of outcomes that Alijah Clark plays like an all-conference safety this upcoming season. I'm not going to necessarily predict that, but it is in the range of outcomes. Similar to Justin Barron, this is someone who doesn't have a lot of interceptions in his career. So once again, I'm going to make a quote-unquote bold prediction and say that Alijah Clark gets 2 interceptions or more this upcoming season. I keep poking fun at myself for making bold predictions because they're really honestly not that bold. All right, but those are the 3 defensive players who made my top 5. Marlowe Wax, Justin Barron, and Alijah Clark. Now, coming up, we're going to go over the final list, the top 5 returning players, and we're going to sort them after this. Hey, Locked On Syracuse fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of Syracuse, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships? You control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Syracuse fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB in all caps inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. So we've gone over the 5 best returning players in Syracuse football, in my opinion, for this upcoming season, which is just 5 days away. And I'm going to give you the 5 players in case you missed it. It was Justin Barron, LeQuint, Alijah Clark, Marlowe Wax, and Oronde Gadsden. Those were the 5 players, 2 on offense, 3 on defense. Leave a comment below who you think are the top 5 returning players on Syracuse football for this upcoming season. Those are my 5. Now it's time to give a final list, and then I'm going to give you guys some of the future plans that I have going forward for this podcast. So be sure to stick around until the end. All right, so the final ranking I got here. Oronde Gadsden. I spoiled it earlier in the podcast. He is number one, and I don't really think it's particularly close. I think he's not only the best returner, he's the best player on the team. He leads a position group that is one of the best position groups in the country. The tight end room for Syracuse is elite. So Oronde Gadsden, this is someone who can be an All-American player. He truly can. He is that talented. As far as his NFL draft ceiling, I don't evaluate NFL prospects, okay? But he could have a big year. That's all I'm saying. He is an All-American caliber player. Oronde Gadsden is definitely number one on my list. Number two, again, I don't really think it's particularly close. I think the top two pretty much stand out on their own, but there's a difference between 1 and 2. Number 2 is Marlowe Wax. Again, an all-conference player the last 2 years. Last season, he was second team All-ACC, and he made preseason All-ACC, which was, once again, just one team in the preseason. So Oronde Gadsden and Marlowe Wax are clearly the top two. The only difference between the two is that I think Gadsden has the higher ceiling, given that he is a former member of the first team All-Conference, and last year he probably would have been again, if not for getting injured, right? He got hurt. Can't do anything about that. And he missed most of the season, but I'm still going to put him number one ahead of Marlowe Wax. But those two are clearly in a league of their own. All right. Number 3, this is where I think the list gets a little bit interesting. I'm going to say LeQuint Allen at number 3. Second team All-ACC, so he has the higher upside of Justin Barron and Alijah Clark. As far as what happens for this year, it's possible that Barron and Clark have better seasons at their respective positions than LeQuint Allen. But based on already the proven body of work of LeQuint Allen, the fact that he was second team All-ACC, as I mentioned last season, the fact that he's a 1,000-yard rusher and still has room to grow, I'm going to put him as the third player on my list of returners. Now, number 4 and number 5, honestly, it was very difficult to have a tiebreaker between Justin Barron and Alijah Clark because I think they're both very, very talented. I ultimately went with Justin Barron, similar to what I said with LeQuint Allen. The upside with Justin Barron, he was an honorable mention All-ACC player last season, and he played half the year with a broken hand. Just imagine what happens if he plays with 2 hands this upcoming season. Now, I could see Alijah Clark being an All-ACC player too. It's definitely in the range of outcomes, like I said earlier in the podcast. But Justin Barron last year made honorable mention. Alijah Clark's been a starter for 2 years. He has not made an all-conference team yet. So I'm going to put Alijah Clark at number 5. But again, that's not really a slight on Alijah Clark because I'm saying the top 5 returning players on Syracuse's roster for next season. So once again, the list. Oronde Gadsden is head and shoulders number 1. Marlowe Wax is head and shoulders number 2. LeQuint Allen at 3. Justin Barron at 4, and Alijah Clark at 5. And once again, leave a comment in the comment section below your list of the 5 best returning Syracuse football players for this upcoming season. Now, as far as for future plans on the podcast, I mentioned earlier in this show that basically, as I started recording this, the depth chart came out for Syracuse football. So I am very, very well aware of it. Now, I'm going to release a mini podcast probably tomorrow going over my takeaways of it. And just a quick spoiler alert, I wasn't really surprised by much. That's why I'm not going to make it a full podcast. So, but there are still some interesting things that I noticed on it. It just wasn't all that surprising. So I will give you guys about a 10 to 12 minute mini podcast about the depth chart takeaways. And then on Tuesday's podcast, we're going to do something similar to what we did for this one, which is the best new Syracuse football players. And, I had my initial list of the 5 best, and I think I'm going to already have to change that. And this is going to stem from the depth chart takeaways. But I think I might put Marcellus Barnes in the top 5 new players for Syracuse football this upcoming season. That's right. A true freshman making the top 5. Hey, it's my list. You can do what you want with your list, but I think he might make mine. So that is it for today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. Helps the channel grow. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the podcast and turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next episode. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need a search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for listening. We're just 5 days away from Syracuse's opener against Ohio, and I'm really looking forward to it, and you should too. Everyone, take care.